They gave my brother $450,000, then tried to take my home. My parents sold their house and gave $450,000 to my brother, then tried to invade my home like they. It started on a Sunday evening, one of those forced family meetings my parents love to call when they've made a big decision without asking anyone else's opinion. We were all sitting in their living room, the air smelling faintly of my mom's overly sweet potpourri. My brother was there too, leaning back in his chair with that smug grin he's perfected since childhood. Dad cleared his throat like he was about to make some monumental announcement. "We've decided it's time," he said, exchanging a proud look with Mom. "We sold the house." I blinked. "You? Sold it? Just like that?" Mom nodded. "It was time for a change. We got a good price too. $450,000. She let the number hang in the air, like she was expecting applause. Before I could even ask what they planned to do with the money, Dad grinned at my brother. "We wanted to give your brother a fresh start, so we gave it all to him. Every penny." It took a second for the words to register. My brother didn't look surprised. In fact, he looked like he'd been waiting for this moment. I laughed, a short, disbelieving sound. "All of it? You didn't think to split it? Maybe help me too?" Mom waved her hand like I'd missed the point entirely. "You don't need help, honey. You have your own home. You're doing fine. But your brother? He's had a rougher go of it." Rougher go of it? He's 35, never kept a job longer than 6 months, and still calls Mom when he needs emergency rent money. Meanwhile, I've been paying my own way since I was 19. I swallowed the lump rising in my throat. "So, you sold the only home we grew up in and just handed him almost $500,000? Dad shrugged. "Family looks out for each other. We know you'll understand." I didn't understand, but I bit my tongue. What good would it do? A week later, my brother moved into his shiny new place. A 2-story with a yard, a big driveway, and a garage for his future cars. I got an invite to his housewarming party, as if I'd want to watch him pop champagne bought with the roof my parents sold out from under themselves. Then the visits began. At first, Mom and Dad would stop by for dinner, saying they missed seeing me. Then they started staying overnight, claiming they were in the neighborhood and didn't want to drive back late. By the 3rd week, they were showing up every few days, suitcase in hand, acting like my guest room was their second bedroom. They'd make little comments over breakfast. "Well, since we don't have our own place anymore, maybe we should just move in here." I thought they were joking. I hoped they were joking. But then came the weekend they showed up with suitcases. They wheeled their suitcases in like they owned the place. My guest room door swung open, and within minutes, Mom was unpacking neatly into the dresser drawers like she was settling in for the season. Dad stacked his shoes by the door, muttering about how cozy it all felt. By that first night, the invasion had begun. It started small. Little comments about my decor. "Oh, sweetie, you still have these curtains? They make the room feel so dark." Then it turned into rearranging my kitchen for efficiency. I'd come home from work to find my spice rack reorganized alphabetically, mugs moved to a different cabinet, pantry labeled in Mom's perfect handwriting. She acted like she was doing me a favor, but it felt like my house was slowly being rewritten. Over dinner, they'd talk about my brother. Every night, without fail, his name came up. "He's really getting it together," Dad would say with pride. "Finally landed on his feet." Mom would chime in about his plans to buy a new truck, how happy she was to see him thriving. I'd nod politely, biting my tongue. They never once asked how I was doing, never mentioned the hours I put in at work, the sacrifices I made to buy this house on my own. Late at night, lying in bed, the flashbacks came. All the times as a kid when my brother got bailed out of trouble. Tickets paid, rent covered, college debt forgiven. Meanwhile, I was told to figure it out and be responsible. I'd worked double shifts to afford my first car. I'd gone without vacations for years to save a down payment. But none of that seemed to matter. Still, I told myself they'd leave soon. They'd get bored, maybe travel, maybe stay with my brother for a while. I kept the peace, tried to ignore the way my home felt less and less like mine. Then the suggestions began. "We've been thinking," Mom said one morning over coffee. "This place is a little too much for you alone." I looked up from my mug. Too much? Dad leaned in. "If you sold it, you could get something smaller. We could all go in on a bigger place together. Somewhere we'd all have space." I laughed, thinking it was a joke. But their faces stayed serious. Mom launched into an imaginary floor plan. Bedrooms for everyone, a shared kitchen, communal spaces where we could spend quality time. The image made my stomach turn. I'd worked my entire adult life for the freedom of my own space. The thought of trading that for a shared life with two people who'd just given away nearly $500,000 to my brother was unthinkable. I brushed it off, changed the subject. But the pressure didn't stop. Every few days, they'd bring it up again, adding little digs about how much work a house like mine must be for someone on their own. I tried to keep my patience, but inside, my frustration was sharpening into something colder. And then, one night, I overheard a phone call that made my blood run cold. It was late. The kind of late where the house is supposed to be quiet, the lights low, and the only sound is the hum of the fridge. I was in my bedroom scrolling through emails when I heard my mom's voice, loud, clear, and echoing from the kitchen. She was on speakerphone. I froze when I heard my brother's laugh. Why, once the deed's in their name," my mom said, her tone dripping with amusement, "we'll split it later. If she keeps being stubborn, we'll just tell her it's for renovations. She'll sign eventually." I stayed perfectly still, my breath shallow. My dad chimed in from somewhere nearby. "Yeah, once we get her to co-sign on that loan, it's as good as ours. She won't even realize until it's done." My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. This wasn't just about them staying too long. This wasn't about them needing a place to crash. They were planning to use me, to gamble my home like it was some bargaining chip in their never-ending mission to prop up my brother's life. 100 memories came flooding back in jagged flashes. The time my brother totaled his car and they asked me to loan him the money for a new one. The way they called me at midnight to cover his rent so he wouldn't end up on the street. And even though I was living on instant noodles just to make my own bills. The guilt trips, the lectures about family duty, the subtle way every crisis somehow became mine to fix. I used to give in. I used to think it was love. But something in me shifted right then. A hard, cold click inside my chest. I got up quietly, careful not to make the floorboards creak. Back in my room, I pulled out the fireproof box I keep under the bed. Inside were my mortgage papers, the title to my house, proof that my name, and only my name, was on it. I laid them out on my desk like a shield. The next morning, I started making calls. I reached out to an old college friend who's now a real estate attorney. She didn't need much explanation before she said, "You need to protect yourself. Now." I took her advice to heart. I began scanning and backing up every document, storing copies in places my parents would never think to look. I checked my credit reports, set up alerts on my accounts, even called my bank to put extra verification steps in place for anything involving my mortgage. I didn't confront them. Not yet. I wanted to know exactly what I was dealing with before I made a move. But the tension in the house was building. I could feel their eyes on me more often, hear their whispered conversations when they thought I was out of earshot. And then, before I could act, they crossed a line I never saw coming. It was a Wednesday. I'd left work early after a meeting got canceled, looking forward to a quiet afternoon. But when I turned onto my street, my stomach dropped. A moving truck sat in my driveway. Two men I'd never seen before were hauling my dining room chairs down the front steps. My parents stood on the porch, directing them like foremen on a construction site. I slammed my car door so hard the sound echoed. "What the hell is going on?" Mom turned, smiling like this was perfectly normal. "Oh, you're home early. We're just moving a few things out for storage. Temporary, until we redo the floors." I looked past her. The hardwood floors I'd refinished myself, gleaming in the sunlight. Redo the floors? With whose money? Dad waved a dismissive hand. "It's all under control. We didn't want to bother you with the details." I stepped onto the porch, my pulse thudding in my ears. "Put everything back. Now." One of the movers paused, looking uncertain. I walked straight into the house, past the chaos of half-empty shelves and stacked boxes, into my office. I grabbed the folder I'd been keeping close for weeks. My mortgage, my title deed, proof this house belonged to me and only me. When I came back outside, I had my phone in my other hand. "Stop moving anything else," I told the workers. "If you keep going, I'm calling the police." Dad's face twisted. "Don't be dramatic. This is just..." I dialed. "Hi, yes, I need officers at address. There are unauthorized movers taking my property without consent." The color drained from Mom's face. "You're calling the cops? On your own parents?" "Yes," I said, my voice calm but ice cold. "Because you're acting like strangers right now." When the officers arrived, I didn't wait for them to ask questions. I laid the paperwork out on the hood of my car, every page signed in black ink, every legal proof that this house was mine alone. The movers didn't take long to get the message. They reloaded my furniture back into the house, muttering apologies. One officer pulled me aside and said, "You're within your rights. They have no claim here." My parents didn't speak until the truck was gone. Then they stormed back into the house, slamming the door so hard the frame shook. "You humiliated us," Mom snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "In front of strangers." Dad's voice boomed behind her. "Family loyalty means nothing to you, does it? After everything we've done for you?" I wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it. After everything they had done for me? This was their gratitude. Trying to steal the home I'd worked my entire life for. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I just watched them rage in my living room, knowing something they didn't. That night, I put the final stage of my plan into motion. The morning after the movers incident, I woke up before sunrise. The house was silent. My parents were still asleep in the guest room. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at the keys in front of me. By 8 a.m., a locksmith's van was in my driveway. I'd already called the night before and booked the earliest slot. The locksmith worked quickly, replacing every lock on the doors, handing me a fresh set of keys still warm from his hands. While he worked, I typed up a short notice and printed it in bold letters. "This is a private residence. Unauthorized entry will be considered trespassing. You are not welcome to stay here." I taped it to the front door at eye level. When my parents finally woke up and tried to leave for a quick errand, they found their old keys no longer worked. They pounded on the door until I opened it just wide enough to hand them their suitcases. "This is my home," I said. "You don't live here. You never will." They shouted, called me heartless, ungrateful, accused me of destroying the family. I didn't answer. I just shut the door, turned the lock, and stood there with my forehead against the wood, listening to the sound of their footsteps fading down the walkway. Then I blocked both their numbers. For a week, I let the quiet wrap around me like a blanket. No surprise knocks, no rearranged kitchen cabinets, no whispered phone calls plotting behind my back. I cooked dinner in silence. I sat in my living room and actually heard the clock ticking. I slept through the night without the creak of the guest room door opening at odd hours. When I finally unblocked them, I called. My voice was calm, almost detached. "You made your choice," I said. "You sold your home. You gave away your safety net. You did it for him. Now you live with it." Mom started to cry. Dad tried to guilt me, but I ended the call before either of them could start twisting my words. Weeks passed. Then my phone rang again. This time my brother's name lit up the screen. I let it go to voicemail, then listened later. His voice was sharp, impatient. "They're driving me insane. They're here all the time, eating my food, complaining about everything. I can't get any work done. You need to take them back." I didn't return the call. A few days later, he tried again, catching me off guard. "I'm serious. They're bleeding me dry. This is your fault." I held the phone to my ear, silent, letting his frustration pour out. When he finally stopped to breathe, I said, "You wanted the money. Now you get the rest of the package." And I hung up. That night, I sat on my porch with a glass of wine, watching the sun drop below the rooftops. For the first time in years, I felt completely at peace in my own home. They wanted my house. Now they can live with theirs, or what's left of it.